Okay, so the title of our paper, In Our Hands Beneath Our Feet, Trans-disciplinary Engagement and the Wicked Problem of Peat in the Republic of Ireland. As you've just heard, Benjamin Gearey, Rosie, Everett, speaking on behalf of a team of people, and actually some other voices in this presentation as well. Claire Nolan, Tadgh Crowley, and Fiona Kearney. Fiona and Tadgh, Fiona and Tadgh are from the Glucksman Gallery in Cork City, and we'll come back to that and the role of the Glucksman Gallery in this work very shortly. Okay, so, there we go. So the first question was going to be, and it's now there's a few more people in the room, we can ask this question. How familiar will people be with peat and peatlands? I'm kind of looking over here, mainly because I know these guys now. Any kind of knowledge at all? Not much. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So as we're going to see shortly, peat and peatlands are playing an increasingly prominent role in aspects of climate change mitigation. And part of this, indeed, if you've not been to Camasoon Bog, which is just down the road here, I can encourage you to kind of go and visit if you've not been there. The bog, peatland, mire, these are all kind of same words for the different words for the same kind of environment, by the way. So Camasoon Bog encapsulates a couple of aspects of peatlands that we're going to come on to. One is the degradation of bogs through time, and the second aspect of this is some of the cultural resonances, as we'll see in Ireland, also contestations around peatlands. So the Musqueam foundation stories are linked to Camasoon Bog and the double-headed serpent, and that's a story we might come back to, look into later on, but we'll move on for now. So that brings the question, really, what and where is peat? And Rosie's going to pick up here.
God. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so when we talk about peat, we talk about a nice wet environment. And actually, the globe's surface, the globe's kind of covering of peat is very lucky. It's only about 3%. And you can see kind of the distribution, large swathes of peatlands across Canada. But part of the joy of having peat on your Earth's surface is they can store up to 3 times more carbon dioxide than some of the Earth's forests, which is a fantastic opportunity that we're going to talk about in a second. But what is it? So peat is the accumulation of decaying organic matter, so plants and debris and wood that build up over time. And you can see that in profile in this bottom picture. You can see the peat kind of accumulating. And depending on what side of the story you're interested in, so myself, I'm interested in the current state of peatlands. We're really interested in kind of the top surfaces, so the nice, active, healthy bog where all of this decomposition process is happening, helping us to kind of build up water storage, carbon dioxide storage, all of the key things that we're interested in as ecologists in that climate change narrative. Benjamin is more interested in the stuff that has built up over time and the opportunities that has in terms of pinpointing some of the cultural, historic, and former kind of economic uses of these landscapes. So really, going back to Derek and Naoko's talk yesterday, we're talking about a system, a long-term system that is built up over time. And across the globe, we're talking about thousands of years. So we're not just talking about relatively new systems. We're talking about systems that have been here mainly since sort of the beginning of the Holocene, the sort of transition from the Ice Age into the warmer climates we're kind of going through at the moment. So peat covers, about 3%. In Canada, about 13%. So quite an extensive area. Next thing. Oh, do you want to? Okay. And why is this important? So this conference is about climate change hope, and how we kind of address some of the globe's challenges about everything from climate change mitigation, so the action we take as scientists, as artists, as historians, as kind of cultural engagement and education. How do we deal with it? Peatlands have been, sorry, this is quite bright, but you can just about see that this is a UNEP policy assessment on the state of the world's peatlands, and they are a key kind of target area for climate action. Why? Because if you restore a peatland into a healthy system, it will sequester carbon, so it will take out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It supports biodiversity, and there are implications for healthy water systems. So all the things that we're really kind of gearing towards for a healthy life on this planet. And this is not a new thing. So at the bottom, there's a nice quote from UNEP, and basically peatlands were targeted as the low-hanging fruit of kind of climate action, meaning it was easy, it's kind of quite relatively inexpensive, and a good way to sort of engage all the different players that we're talking about at this conference in climate action. And that was back in 2007, 2008. So, you know, the globe's kind of thinking about why we need to kind of protect peatlands has been going on for nearly 20 years, which is fantastic. And we were very lucky to visit Burns Bog in Burnaby, is it? Delta, sorry, in Delta the other day. And you can see that they have been undertaking some sort of restoration at the site, and they've been monitoring things there, like their carbon sequestration potential. So it really is around that sort of climate action narrative.
Okay, so one of the issues around the need for the restoration of peatlands really across the globe, particularly in Northwest Europe, is this. So we're now taking you several thousand miles east over to Ireland. Hopefully some of you recognise the map of Ireland there. Ireland is about 20% by land surface peatland of one form or another. And a large swathe of peatland, particularly in the Midlands of Ireland, picked out in pink there, the peatlands look like that. So they're not functioning peatlands anymore. They've been extracted, they've been drained for fuel, for burning. And that's been going on really for about 60 years in Ireland. So most peatland environments in Ireland, and indeed elsewhere in the world, are heavily degraded. So when peatlands are degraded, they're the opposite of what Rosie was talking about. They're emitting CO2, so they're contributing to climate change, hence the importance of restoration. Okay, so again, at the risk of this becoming like a kind of geography first year lecture about the importance of peatlands, the kind of the background to this is important, as we'll see. And especially in Ireland, and as we've seen a small example with the local bogs here, Camassoon Bog in particular, is the cultural resonance around peatlands. So again, some of you may well recognise Seamus Heaney, and some of you may well be aware of Heaney's cycle of bog poetry. Really kind of iconic poems about peatlands in Ireland, also reference archaeology, of which a bit more in a minute. But again, you kind of find out peatlands feature so much in cultural production in Ireland. That's the art of Paul Henry, bottom left. I mean, these are just examples. There's all sorts of other examples we could go into. And the other side of this is this as well, is the complexities and contestations of peatlands in Ireland, not least the colonial context, so the denigration of the Irish as bog trotters, which is an expression you may well be aware of. So that kind of context of, if you're from the bogland, you're kind of backward, you're primitive. And so there's all these kind of cross-cutting complexities and resonances around peatlands. The other side of this is that peatlands, the irony of peat extraction in Ireland is the fact that it's exposed thousands of archaeological sites. So the preservation, particularly of organic matter that you get in peatland environments before they're drained, so wood, cloth, fabric, bone, all these kind of materials we don't get preserved on terrestrial sites, are preserved in wetlands. Again, bog bodies will probably be the most popular touchstone here. Actually very rare in Irish peatlands. Just a few quick examples really of the sites we get in Irish bogs. We get lots of trackways of different ages, bless you. We get metalwork. In the bottom there, we have a hoard of Bronze Age, 3,000-year-old metalwork discovered in a peatland in Ireland. All sorts of strange things like this. On the right there, we have a figure. It's an anthropomorphic figurine. It dates the Bronze Age. It's about 3,500 years old. Thank you. Again, unearthed in a bog. And the irony here is all this cultural heritage is being exposed and destroyed by peat extraction. And this brings us to the contestation around peatlands and cultural heritage, because for some people in Ireland, some communities, peat cutting, peat extraction is also a form of cultural heritage. So we have this contestation that has got more bitter since the Irish state announced the end of industrial scale peat extraction. When was that? Recently. We're going to pick our pace up a bit here now. And what's this led to? What this has led to is the failure of the Irish state to enforce at least hand cutting, bans on hand cutting of turf. Very recently has led to the island being referred to the European Court for failing to protect its boglands.
I was just going to go back one slide. Sorry. One of the things I was going to say is actually, yeah, very quick, is as part of this challenge, as sort of policymakers that are involved with this climate change mitigation action for protecting peatlands, conserving peatlands, is that you become very much embroiled in this conversation of how do we manage the ecosystem services that are afforded to peatlands. So everything from the biodiversity, the culture, the water, the management of carbon dioxide, and all of this cultural stuff is pretty much deeply embedded across Ireland. So it's not just like pockets of people, like it's whole communities. So actually, when you're writing policy to this scale, you're writing policy for not just policymakers in government, but also entire communities like this. So it's very much a complex system problem.
All right. So yeah, the problem of peace is a wicked problem. We don't need to go into what wicked problems are. Again, this is something that Derek and Oko talked about in the keynote, but really just to kind of the back end of this presentation, it looks at this and some of the work we've been involved in, and that is how can we communicate these complex issues more broadly beyond the academy to the public, to different communities of practice. How can we kind of work to transcend these kind of divisions? And again, this is something we've heard a lot about in the conference, and the previous paper talks about that as well. And this is some work we've been involved in for the last few years, myself and Rosie and colleagues, with different community groups in Ireland, and particularly looking at different aspects of peatland, ranging from the deep time in peatlands, so peatland formation processes, and working with community groups, looking at the pollen grains that are preserved in some of these deposits, for example, working with Creative Nation and other organisations to kind of raise the profile of the value and importance of peatlands beyond either a source of fuel, or indeed, from the scientific point of view, from the point of view of, you know, just something that's in service of humanity as a carbon sink, if you like. There's different ways we've done this. I'm going to fly through this. I'll hand around the postcard shortly. So we've done work. We've worked with artists. We've worked with woodworkers. So this was an event that involved the recreation of the Red Man of Kilbeg I showed earlier. This was an event with schools we did. So Mark Griffiths, woodworker, remade the figurine. We had school groups came around. We talked to them about heritage. We talked to them about peatlands. So it was a way to talk about the importance of bogs, you know, without kind of hectoring on about this. And we got them to colour in pictures of the Red Man. We asked them their opinions of what the figurine might have meant, what its relevance might have been. And this kind of culminated in a work with the Glucksman Gallery, two exhibitions. The first one, Radical Archaeology, is if the QR code should work, if someone could just check that for me. So rather than pulling you through this exhibition, so this is a collaboration with the Glucksman, contemporary Irish art that references some of these touchstones about landscapes, environment, contestation, and so forth, and a real fantastic range of contemporary Irish art there. So, you know, if you want to have a look at that, again, we could go on all day about some of these artists, but we don't have time. And what that led to next was an education program that involved local schools. So we had about 800 local school children who came around and saw the exhibition and worked with the Glucksman's education team to produce their own artworks in response to the Irish art, the contemporary art, and response to some of the themes around heritage and climate and peatlands and wise use of resources. Again, if you click the QR code, you'll get a bit more information on that. So really just to kind of finish off, we're just going to show you a few of the images that the school groups produced for the Glucksman. I mean, some remarkable stuff. And they were working in clay, producing little clay models and different kind of media as well, paintings and so forth. And here's just a few examples. Again, I've got some cards I'll hand out in a minute. So there were hundreds of artworks produced by the kids. I mean, some are absolutely stunning. Top right, you can see that one there, kind of clay models. I think, again, drawing on ideas of what you find in peat bogs, bog bodies, using clay and leaves and other materials. This rather wonderful, kind of haunting face we've got there. But all sorts of stuff. Sorry, you can't see that at all well, due to it seems to have flipped itself. But again, this is a wonderful image that one of the school kids produced. And what we also had on display as part of the exhibition was a piece of bogwood. So bogwood is wood that's preserved in peatlands. And we just literally had a piece of that. Just natural. It wasn't archaeological in the sense it hadn't been kind of worked by humans. Very common in bogs. And we were told later that was one of the most engaged with things by the kids, which really surprised me. Apparently they loved it. 3,000-year-old piece of wood sat on a table. They could touch it. They could handle it. And this piece references that. Again, you can't quite see the text, but that's this girl talking about the importance of the wood. And this is another one of my favorites. This is a bogman. So one of the kids produced an entire booklet called Bogman, who seems to go around telling people about the importance of bogs. So you can see there, Bogman is saying this bog is over 12,000 years old. So this is a great, this has been such a rewarding piece of work. It was brilliant. And whilst I don't know, we heard in the previous talk, and there's been other discussions about the role of art in communication. It's really important. My concern is always that if we instrumentalize art too much, I don't know where it takes us. But this has certainly been, a way of communicating. Sorry, you can't see this very well. What we did at the end of the exhibition is we approached the teachers who brought the school groups around, and we asked them to fill out questionnaires about. We couldn't obviously approach the kids directly and ask them about what they'd learned, but what's coming out of the survey is the fact that the teachers are saying that the kids have learned more about climate change, they've learned more about bogs, and they've enjoyed themselves doing that. So that's kind of us. Ari, I don't know if you want to add anything briefly to that. This is another piece that we wrote. Again, the QR code should work. This isn't in the conversation. Again, this expands a bit on some of the work and some of our thinking, and also references some of the artists that we talk about, that we talked about in the exhibition. So do have a look at that. Again, the role of art and peatlands, climate crisis, carbon, how we talk about these complex issues.
No, and I think it's a good way of thinking about trying to take on a challenging part of the climate crisis. Restoring peatlands is hard. It's hard. They are ecologically complex, which I won't go into, but having an alternative vehicle, whilst not, we are not artists, having that as having a support kind of network and tool at our fingertips for thinking about communicating challenges that are often so difficult to do. So, if you're trying to talk to children about, raising water tables or carbon dioxide, it feels too abstract. But actually, by having something that they can work with and having things they can touch and having things that they can talk about, just allows us to have that kind of process in front of us. That means that they go away and they understand. If they see somebody talking about, peatlands in the news, they have something as a touchstone. And I think in terms of what this work is trying to achieve, it's, I think we should be taking this to policymakers, because I feel like they would listen to us more if we did more stuff in art galleries and sitting around round tables. But it's just about kind of how you create a commonality for everybody to understand something. And it's not that people cannot understand it, but restoration practice requires being out in the field, and it requires, time and money. And actually, this is a much nicer way of doing it. So no, it's been a good project. It's been a good learning experience. And it's been good for us because we've had to learn how to communicate what we're trying to achieve in a non-academic setting, which I think is always a good way to push your kind of experience and kind of knowledge. So no, it's been excellent. So yeah, thank you very much.